Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. Those of you who've been with us a while know that a revenue culture is achieved when you are maximizing your profits because you optimized your people in a low friction revenue context. It's obvious you'll never maximize your profits if you don't have your people optimized. But one of the places we get confused is we think we should optimize our people about our tactical business. I'm going to be the best home builder or the best chef or the best programmer. And by being the best at what I do, I'm going to make a lot of money. Well, I think we've all seen a whole lot of businesses go out of business that were really good at what they did, but they didn't understand how to transfer value to customers and create a great place for their people to work and become optimized about transferring value to the customer. So this podcast is dedicated to helping us all understand that. And in the last 2 years, Josh and I, who now in 2026, Josh is the co-facilitator for this, we started looking at, can any of us do this by ourselves? That question lasted about a minute and a half. And we realized, no, we can't possibly do it by ourselves. And then we started looking at how do we create an environment, a context, a culture? And it really came down to we need a community. And so we're this year going to spend our time trying to learn the best way to build a community. And we know that doesn't come from Josh and I sitting in the office deciding it by ourselves. So we are asking, our friends and some of our peers and some people we didn't even know a week ago to come in and share with us what they see, what they believe, what their experience says about what it takes to create what we call a revenue game community, where you obtain your smart rev resources and you get to live that revenue culture. And today I'm thrilled to have John Klein and Paul Sim with us. Worked with both of them for now, John, probably 5 or 6 years, Paul, a couple of years. And I'm just thrilled to have them here. And Josh, anything you want to say before we have them introduce themselves?
I'm just glad to be a co-host now, all the years spent behind the camera doing all the editing and everything. So it's cool to have my voice heard now while I'm doing a little bit of the editing. So thank you for having me here. And also John and Paul, thank you guys for being here. I'm very excited for today.
So, gentlemen, I'd love to have each of you kind of give us a few minutes on your background and what got you here, and tell us where here is and what the next step that you're looking for in your career. So, and John, I'm going to ask you to start because you beat Paul to the Zoom room today. So you get to go first.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's an honor, and it's been a blessing to learn this stuff. I've been learning from Rick for many years. He might not even remember me when I was a young man sitting up in an executive in the Gazelles group, learning about the revenue game. And a lot of folks here in town, we all kind of speak a similar language, or we'll say, "Oh, what's that you just said? Was that something from Rick McPartland?" "Oh, yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, it was." Uh, and then to get to work with Rick and then to dream about the future, about how we can apply all this stuff. It's been fun. Um, how I got here, honestly, I have no idea. I'm just a dumb country boy from Michigan. I went in the Navy. I came here because it was sunny, there was no snow, and there were a lot of golf courses. And I ended up working in technology. The internet was coming along. Al Gore had just invented it when I was in college in around 96, 97. And we were playing around with it. And I just didn't want to work for a large company. I didn't want to be a number. I wanted to be known. And I had the good fortune of building some stuff. Somebody gave me money for it, gave me a runway, and off we were. We raised some money, we built a data center, we did some stuff. We lost a bunch of money because the bubble burst. We learned all about the bubbles in SmartRev. And I ended up doing something I didn't even know you could make money doing in transactional mail, stuffing envelopes for people's receivables. And along the way, I learned something very important that understanding in a business, you got a bunch of people in here in Arizona. We all mostly we all speak English. We all at least speak the same base language, but we don't speak the same language even inside the organization. And man, the kind of chaos that that causes. And for some reason, I always found myself in the middle of groups who thought they were disagreeing with each other, couldn't understand they actually were agreeing, or they're trying to understand, why are we doing this? This is stupid. What's it? Oh, we don't like those salespeople, and the salespeople are like, what's the matter with those engineers? Don't they understand business? What's you know? You guys have all heard this, and I always found myself in the middle, going, well, wait a minute, are you saying this? Yeah. Are you saying this? Yeah. Well, you guys know that you're agreeing. Do you guys understand why this? Oh, really? And then things would happen. And I really don't want to oversimplify SmartRev. Um, but in my head, that's what I hear when I hear low friction context, shared understanding. Everyone shares, right? The artificial horizon or the true north. Everybody understands when you say ICP or you say ideal buyer, whatever word you're using, everybody has the same definition. And the minute everybody has the same definition of a word, oh my gosh, things happen. That's why I latched onto this when I first heard it. It always came up over and over again, and I have always been a huge fan. And I'm just happy that we can be here talking about it and helping maybe bring some of this understanding to other folks to help maybe remove the fog of what's going on, because you often come into work and you go, I just don't understand why this isn't, it's used to be easy. Why is this so hard? Why is everybody angry? Why aren't we delivering to our customers? Where are they going? It usually happens as a result of some of the core foundational revenue strategy, revenue culture stuff we're going to talk about. So I probably said enough. As you can tell, I don't like to talk, especially in front of strangers. So,
My path is a little bit different than John. Well, I started my career, myself and a bunch of other farm boys up in Saskatchewan, which is where I was raised, got together early part of the personal computer revolution and decided we should write some software for farm applications. Didn't have a clue what we were doing, running a business, even writing software for that matter. Although we had a couple of guys that were pretty good technologists, but we stumbled our way along, and eventually that company was sold to the Farm Credit Corporation in Saskatchewan. So my first sort of business venture was an entrepreneurial one, but then by that time I had a mortgage and a couple of kids, and it was like I probably should have a paycheck. And so I ended up getting involved in the corporate world. And I actually started out there with the objective of I want to be in the corporate life. I want to, become a vice president or president. And eventually I did. I worked my way through farm equipment business, the construction equipment business, and eventually into the emergency vehicle business. And so sort of the most transformational experience I had was I was put in charge of this manufacturing facility in Canada that we built fire trucks. We were owned by a company in the US, and I had been like the vice president of sales for the organization, building the dealer network. And I think they put me in charge of it because they figured I'd fail and that would give them an excuse to close down the plant. And so I didn't have a clue about manufacturing. But I just went out on the shop floor and started asking people, how do we make this thing better? And that was the first real clue I had about how you actually run a business successfully. And because all of a sudden the ideas started to come off the shop floor and we started making changes, and all of a sudden we started making some money, and then that's how I ended up becoming a vice president. I got an offer to be a VP down at the head office in Florida for the company at the time. So moved my family across the continent and only to have the CEO that hired me get fired a few months following, and the new CEO and I didn't really weren't really cut out for a long-term relationship, and so we ended up buying a business here in Phoenix, and that's how we moved. So I transitioned from the corporate world because I realized as I got higher and higher in the big corporations, it became more and more about politics and less about what you were actually doing and executing on a day-to-day basis. So started a business or got involved in a business 2003, sold that in 2007, had my first kind of kick at the can in consulting for a few years, and then got involved with the company that we developed a solar powered robot for cleaning swimming pools, and we built and eventually sold that a couple of years ago. So I hung up my consulting shingle again because didn't want to risk everything we had on some crazy entrepreneurial adventure again, and was fortunate enough to connect up with John, and we decided to focus on uh, helping organizations agree on their reality and execute together. That's what we do at the Gap Feed.
Very cool. Well, Josh, where do you want to go with it now?
Well, I have a question for both of you individually, then I have a couple questions. You guys can tag team together. So since Paul, you just went, I'll start with John. We'll give Paul a little break. John, one thing that has stood out to me is your flexibility with language and diagnostics. How important is that when different industries and different people speak different languages?
It's exceedingly important because usually that is the chasm that stops things from happening, especially when we're talking about organizations where you've got multiple stakeholders involved. And it doesn't really matter what you're dealing with at this time, whatever it is valuable that you have to transfer, and you have more than one person at the table that's involved making that decision, you invariably have at least as many languages as you do people at the table. You also have as many interests because everybody has varied interests. And being able to quickly discern that, well, first of all, just knowing that that exists, that's a
Yep.
revelation because a lot of times you don't know that that even exists. But once you know that exists, being able to discern that and get other people to understand that you understand them, you can speak their language when you need to, and then help grab everybody's hands and get them to start using the same language, that usually it breaks down all the barriers. Because I don't know if you've ever had this conversation where you're the pronouns, people are using I and me and we, and the minute they start using ours, the conversation completely has changed. That's a very small example of what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
but to your question, it's exceedingly important, and nothing's going to get done well, be agreed upon, and people in alignment with, and fully adopt until they have that shared language.
Awesome. Love that. Thank you so much. Paul, one question for you is why do most companies get stuck between revenue growth and operational reality?
Well, I think it's because they're first of all, many organizations start as sort of founder led, right? And a lot of times that founder is he's starting a business based on some skill or insight, he or
Right.
she, skill or insight they have that gives them some advantage in the marketplace. And so they leverage off that skill and insight and the relationships they have to build and grow the business. But there's a really good chance that maybe they've never really run a business before. And so eventually you have to hire people, you have to, try to organize the way work flows in the organization. You have to do those sorts of things. And a lot of times those things just evolve. They're not designed from the start. They just
Right.
evolve. And evolution results in things like the platypus, right? And stuff. Sometimes you end up through organizations that just evolve, you end up with things that just kind of don't make a lot of sense, right? And people create their own little silos of data and silos of information and silos
Yep.
of activity. And if you want to get to the next level, you have to figure out, how do we make this all work together? How do we actually get the information to flow smoothly through the organization, get the work to flow smoothly through the organization, make sure that we all have agreement on what it is we're doing in the first place,
Yep.
right? And so I think that that's, almost all organizations run into that at some point. So, that's one stage where organizations run into that. The other stage is way on the other end. You get so big and you have so many silos in your organization that it seems almost impossible to pull them all together to work together. And those silos have tremendous power frequently within those big
Yeah.
organizations and can drive their own bus.
Yeah.
But if you get a big silo within a big organization driving a bus in a different direction, it's going to end up in like an I-95 disaster. So I think those are some of the reasons that organizations experience the kind of chaos that we love to come in and help them with.
Yep. Yes, we do. A theme, this is for both of you. A theme from our last call was that people don't just need tools, they need a framework. And why is that so important right now?
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem is with tools is that maybe you look at it and say, well, we've got this problem, right? And this tool can help us solve this problem.
Yep.
Well, for instance, let's talk about technology. We've got a problem where we have these silos of information and people are working on spreadsheets and all. We need an ERP system so that we can pull all this information together, right? So the ERP system is a tool that's going to solve everything. So now you implement the ERP system, but if you haven't actually thought about how do our works, how does our work actually flow through the organization? What are the processes? What are we trying to deliver to the customer in the first place?
Yep.
If you haven't got that figured out and you've got chaos in your organization, all of a sudden, all you're going to do is automate chaos. So you don't have a framework for running your business. You're just implementing a tool that's going to let you, you know, deliver chaos
Yeah.
more rapidly. And so frameworks are about how do we actually build a business that successfully delivers value to the customer.
Yeah.
First of all, we need to know what that value is, and then what are all the steps we execute in our process to deliver that value and deliver on that brand promise on a day-to-day basis. That system can be analog, it can be digital, but you need to have a system that delivers that value and a framework that operates within your business that allows you to deliver that value.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I don't remember who said this, so I'll have to apologize for not giving the right attribution. But all metals are broken, and everyone are useful. Somebody said that, and I think it's absolutely true because the model, the importance of the model, it gives you a framework with which a picture in your head, which you can think about something, right? That simplifies the complex. So that's where their value comes in. Now, every consultant makes a bunch of money by having their own proprietary model. But at the end of the day, every single one of these models answers the fundamental questions that Paul just talked about. Why do we exist? What do we do? How do we do it? For whom do we do it? Right? You answer those questions and you get everybody to agree and understand what those are. They're going to start making really good decisions about things. And you're going to start figuring out where are the problems and the bottlenecks. Well, wait a minute. That's the wrong person. Wait a minute, that's the wrong thing. They stop being big problems that they used to be when you get people all kind of like pulling the oars in the same direction.
Yep.
And that's where the value of that comes from for that model, because you get to put the picture in your head and then you get to make good decisions.
It's easier to have people follow you that way, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Way easier.
And if they agree with the why, not only will they follow you, they will amplify you.
Love it.
So if we combine your diagnostic capability with our strategy process, what becomes measurable that usually stays fuzzy?
So our diagnostic model, and thanks for giving us an opportunity to plug it a little bit, but our diagnostic model is built around a sort of two factors. we help organizations look at best practices or operational concepts in their organization and ask them to evaluate it on two criteria. One is, how important do you think this is to the business? And the second is, how well are you doing at it right now? So it's really interesting um, really what we're measuring is perception. And perception is a real important factor in an organization. Um, and because if you perception is a reflection of alignment, right? And we all like to talk about alignment, but alignment is critically important. If people aren't aligned behind an understanding of your vision, an understanding of your brand promise, an understanding of how the work is done, it doesn't get done. And our tools are designed to measure the perception of how well that is happening within your organization. And the really interesting thing comes when a leadership team takes an assessment, and then we apply that assessment across the entire organization. And you find these big differences in perception within the organization about what's working well, what's important. There's no alignment on what's important, and there's no alignment on what's working well. And so it starts to drill down into what are the things we really need to work on? What's our shared reality? Let's create a shared reality that we agree on, and then we can start to actually make some difference in the business.
Rick said something great, and I'll give you credit here. And if I forget to do it in the future, you all it's recorded here that I gave him credit. Reality cannot be seen from one position, role, or point in time. And that's the God's honest truth, right? You can have your reality, right? And I'm not talking fuzzy woo-woo reality. I mean, like, you get to see things, and when you're at the top in the C-suite, you see things, right? You have metrics and data, and it's all real. But it's not the totality of what's going on in the organization. You're seeing symptoms, right? You may not be seeing root cause, and unless you consider everyone else and kind of understand how they're seeing it, it's hard for you to have clarity and make a good decision, because we all want to make a good decision, and nobody comes in and says, I want to screw everything up and throw all the pieces off the board and go home. But the problem is when you reach the point where it's all stalled and people are upset and the numbers aren't going and people's jobs are on the line, tribes start forming and people start becoming lazy and stupid and misunderstanding, and it's all. But when you put all that at the table, people stop being dumb and they stop being lazy, and then you start creating shared understanding, and then they start being felt heard, and then the conversation shifts. Not from who's to blame, but what are we going to do about it? Did you have any idea this is the problem? I had no idea whatsoever. They kind of almost start solving themselves once you get everybody like in that space. And I think it's the beauty of the tool, because you can make any statement you want. And you can ask people, how important is this, and how good are you at it? So it's very flexible, and it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, so I just add to what John said. Show me a leader that consistently says, my people can't get the job done correctly. I can't find good people. My turnover is way too high, and I'm just frustrated by how these people can't get their job done. And if you show me a leader that communicates like that, I'll show you an organization that doesn't have a clue how they do the work in their organization or what they're supposed to be doing, because people don't want to show up to work every day wanting to screw up. They show up to work wanting to do a good job, and if they don't have a system that allows them to execute properly, they just get frustrated. And yeah, some people do check out, but that's a leadership issue. That's not an employee issue.
Who was it? Was it Deming? A bad system beats a good person every time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of systems, what does a clear process or system do for confidence inside an organization?
You want to tackle that, John? I'm talking a lot here. I'll let you tackle.
No, I was hoping you were going to tackle it.
Sure. So a clear process and system allows people to operate with confidence. I think that's the biggest issue. It's confidence inspiring in an organization, right? People, when they don't know what it is they're supposed to do or how it is they're supposed to do it, their initial reaction is, gosh, I'm not sure what I should do. I'm kind of afraid. I'm not sure I want to jump in. I'm not sure I want to take a risk. I think this is how I'm supposed to do it, but if it's not and I screw it up, I know my boss is going to get mad at me. So you see all of that kind of thing happening. If you have a clearly defined process in an organized, hey, here's how things get done. Here's how the data gets used in the process. Here's what we're delivering to the customer at the end of this value stream. If you have alignment on all that stuff, people can operate with they say, "Oh, yeah, I know what I'm supposed to do. I know how to execute that. If I don't, I'm going to ask for the training. I'm not afraid to do that." And so all of a sudden, the whole organization, instead of being shy, becomes confident. And when people in an organization become confident, then that opens up all kinds of doors. People don't come to you with problems to solve until they're confident that they'll be heard and that they fit within the organization and they understand. But once you build that confidence in an organization, all of a sudden problems seem to get easier to identify and easier to solve as well. So I would say process effective systems it's a confidence builder, and that's the key part of what that delivers.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Paul had mentioned this before, which what came to mind is systems are great, but if you can't do the arithmetic, do not give a person a calculator, right? Which means you have to have those fundamental why. Why am I here? What am I doing? For whom am I doing it? How am I doing it? Why does this matter? Right? Because now I can participate. Because once I know how to do arithmetic, I can know when the calculator is giving me the wrong answer. I can also come up with a way to optimize what I'm doing to the calculator, how I'm inputting the numbers. Maybe I'm doing some extra math before I start punching numbers. It unlocks my ability as a human being to layer in my own creativity, expertise, and stuff that helps the organization move forward. And actually, it's a geometric effect. It's not even a linear effect, right? Because these multiply on top of each other when you get everybody's energy, creativity, and uniqueness all moving in the same direction, contained in a bubble with a shared purpose and all that thing. It's just amazing. And systems designed well with that with that information communicated broadly, like Paul was referring to, unlocks the ability of those things to happen.
Great. Last question from me, kind of piggybacking off of what you guys are saying. So it's really about creating clarity first, then we're building a repeatable deployment path. If I were an organization working with you guys, what does that first step look like?
So I believe that if you're going to implement change in an organization, there's three steps. First, you have to agree on what your reality is. Second of all, you have to agree on what it is you're going to do and where you want to go. So here's our reality, here's our vision. So there's a gap there, right? And then the next part is, what are the roadblocks that stand in the way of us moving from where we are to where we want to be? And how do we address those roadblocks? So many times organizations jump into solutioning without really creating clarity around what's our reality and where are we trying to go. And so that's where we always like to start, Josh. It's about, let's come to agreement on what our shared reality is. Where are the problems really in this organization? Can the organization come to agreement on what those are? And then we can start talking about what the solutions are. But if you don't have agreement on your reality, you're just going to implement a bunch of stuff. Some of it may have some impact, some of it may not. But in many cases, you're just going to end up back at the same place because you haven't agreed on where you are, where it is you need to go. And then let's talk about the roadblocks to get between the two.
I would love to, like, if we were in a room with a bunch of people, I would ask the questions, okay, by a show of hands, how many of you worked at an organization where they implemented something and you were just completely amazed and couldn't understand how in the world could they do this? Don't they know about this? Don't they see that whatever it is that they did is going to screw this up? Right? I worked at that company. That's exactly what he's talking about. I just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy.
And a critical part of that is the emotional maturity of the leadership in the organization to be able to face their reality. And I learned that the hard way as a leader in an organization of being unwilling to accept the truth about what was happening in the business and thinking I could just muscle my way. I was a strong enough guy. I had the charisma and leadership skill. I could make people get this done. And, doesn't happen. You gotta you gotta have the emotional maturity, and that doesn't necessarily come with gray hair. I've met some young folks that are really emotionally mature. You gotta have the emotional maturity to be willing to look into that mirror as an organization, as a leadership team, and say, okay, this is where we're really at, and let's accept that this is where we're really at, and then you can do something about it. Until you get to that point,
Yep.
it's probably not gonna whatever you do is probably not gonna be that successful because you're not dealing with the real stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. I swear there's a ream of data related to this that talks about the size of the organization we're talking about, where you get enough people where it gets complex and you need to systematize some things and get some processes in place so people keep moving around. That the big problem, if not the number one, maybe the number two, is problem identification. And it stems from exactly what Paul talked about, clear understanding of reality, shared reality, not my reality from my little, fiefdom over here in the back office with the nice, pretty view of the park, and then being able to focus in on what's really wrong, right? Not what we believe to be wrong, not because it's their fault, because we're smarter or better than them. The actual problem.
Yeah. Well, and it's making that jump from we're going to treat the symptoms to we're actually going to try to figure out what the root cause is and get after that.
Exactly.
If the symptom is our margins are declining, there can be an inclination to say, well, we're just going to fire some people and improve our margins, right? I mean, that's one way to treat that symptom, right? But it may not be the right long-term way to treat it. What's really the root cause? Why are your margins declining? Do you understand that? And then let's tackle that. What's causing that erosion? But if all you're looking at is your financial statements or something on your dashboard, almost everything the leadership team is looking at describes the symptoms, that are happening in the business,
Yeah.
and almost never leads them to the root cause. So I guess if I would say, another answer to your question, Josh, is in terms of what do we do? Part of understanding your reality is understanding what are the root cause issues that you have to deal with here. What's causing all the stuff that's keeping you awake at night, that's giving you challenges and problems.
Yeah.
What are those root causes? And that's not always obvious. That takes some work. That's hard work.
And you said it before, sometimes you got to look yourself in the mirror because you might be the cause if you're the leader and you're high up enough, right? Because
Yeah.
it
I,
can't
I,
always
I,
be
I've, I've been
beforehand.
there, done that. It's like, oh, shoot, I was trying to fix all this stuff, and really, I should have been fixing some of my own stuff here.
Yeah.
Well, the other part of what you guys are saying is whatever the problem was when we started talking about it 6 months ago, in the crazy world we're in today, it might be completely different 6 months later.
Yeah.
Once you fix it, another problem just arises that you have to then, pivot and adapt to.
That's right.
Yeah, some of us are.
Remove a constraint in one part of your system, and it's going to show up somewhere else. And so, but robust organizations that have methodologies and have ways of understanding what's really going on in their business, which is what we try to help them do. You can deal with that. I mean, that's the reality. Things are going to change. Customers are going to change. Your realities are going to change. But let's monitor and understand what our reality is on an ongoing basis, not just at the high level dashboard financial statements, but let's really drill down and understand what's
Yeah.
going on in the organization functionally and operationally.
When you get that work, well, first of all, being able to diagnose the problem, right? That's a great skill. Being able to pull those out, get people aligned and agreed upon and work them. That's fantastic, right? That gets you unstuck to move to the next level. Now, the next challenge is forecasting problems because to your point, Rick, you're always going to have a problem. It's going to be one thing or it's going to be another. The world is full of volatility, uncertainty, change, and ambiguity. VUCA, whoever came up with that term, that's a given. That is a constant. So by definition, you have got to be able to forecast and be able to deal with it. You can't just sit back and go, okay, we solved it.
Yep.
That's it. We're done.
You got to
Now we're
start
just gonna...
preparing for the next one.
Exactly. You're looking for it. Yeah,
John,
exactly.
I remember reading the book Black Swan 20 some years ago, and it was like, well, that's you're only going to see one black swan in your career. Well, I've been tracking black swans since 2000. There's one about every 14 months.
Yeah.
And so you just better get ready for that next crazy, chaotic, unexpected, game-changing thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing about it is when you have these skills or you have a way in which to operate, those don't become catastrophic. They become
Right.
opportunities.
Yes. Yes.
So let me put that in another context too, in terms of the black swan concept. Not everyone agrees with me, but I believe we're headed to another recession in the not that distant future. And if you learn from the last recession and previous downturns, the organizations that survive those are the ones that have fixed the stuff we're talking about, right? The ones that have clarity on their purpose, the ones that have clarity on the value that they offer to the customers, the ones that have created a system and a structure that allows them to deliver on that. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to have problems and they're not going to suffer. But the reality is all of that stuff also typically results in a little bit better margins, a little bit better operating results, a little bit more cash in the bank. And the folks that go into whenever this next recession happens with some cash in the bank, they are going to have some tremendous opportunities available to them because the companies that don't do this now and hit the next recession, they're going to disappear. People that have cash in the bank are going to be able to buy assets at 10 cents on the dollar. And so, like I say, not everyone agrees with my economic forecasting, but regardless of whether you do or not, you should prepare yourself for that possibility.
There's always going to be a winter coming, and sooner or later. But so I think to your point though, Paul, I think to think that there's never going to be a recession or there isn't one around the corner is pretty naive, especially if you look backwards. And anybody who's learned anything, one of the first things you learn in Smart Rev, right, that you'll teach is the bubbles always bust. And those who operate with bubble mentality, they're going to get caught. And that's exactly what you're saying, because what is a recession? It's just the bursting of a bubble. Well, I operate in a bubble. And so I don't have to do these things because the money's just coming in and we're stupid rich with all of it. Well, the bubble bursts and the money goes out and that's it. They dry up, the company goes away. But the people who didn't operate in the bubble, who did these things and did these solid things, they go from boom to bust to boom to bust, from bubble to bubble, and they're just fine. And they're growing along the way.
Yeah. So I'm going to redirect us here for a minute. One of the things we promised to talk about today is this community that we want to build, and we couldn't have scripted you guys better for this conversation because you talked about a common language, getting agreement across organizations, and avoiding individual tribes that are at war with each other, and so. I want your input, your feedback as we think about this community. What we believe is that creating a common foundation for operation a common language. And that's for those of us who deploy. And Paul, as you were talking about, um, the constraint just moves from one place to another. If the constraint started out, we couldn't produce enough. Well, you talked about margin, and most people think about margin as I got to fire people, exactly what you said. I'm, on the other hand, thinking, what a crappy sales team. Our marketing message is horrible. We could be getting another 15% if we understood the customer and knew how to create a better offer. And so, as we look at these things, having spent a career basically trying to get things sold, I realized no matter how good I was always getting hit by a constraint. And I don't know how to fix that constraint. If it's people, maybe I hired the wrong ones. Maybe I didn't onboard them fairly. Maybe I didn't give them a career path. Maybe I didn't teach people how to lead, so that maybe my problems are all self-created by the way I deal with my teams. And so as I at our company look at this, if that's the problem, I'm not the solution. I need to go find somebody else who I can bring in to help my clients solve those problems. I don't do any of the gap analysis you guys do, but I wish every client I ever worked with not only did the one up front, but that did one 6 months later or every quarter or at least annually. And when the constraint moves, do it again. So I know where the constraint moved to. And if I do an acquisition, I want to understand how the organizations that I acquired or acquired me, how we work together or don't. So we're thinking about this community as a group of people who can look across the room and say, John, can you come help my client with this? Because I'm not good at this and my client needs it. And Paul, can you help with that? Because we speak the same language and the client will understand what you're talking about and they can take action with you. And that's the direction that we're trying to go with this. And I'm just curious, and you guys have seen some of the early material we've developed around, how do we triage that community to make sure we're kind of on the same page. If that existed in the world, given where you're going, what questions would you have, or how would you want to explore it, or what challenges would you put up for it?
Well, first of all, I think the concept of having a community of folks like ourselves who are committed to helping small, mid-sized organizations be successful in an environment where they can, there's lots of challenges and struggles. I think it's a great concept. And I also believe that there's not necessarily any one of us. We all do kind of unique things. SmartRev has some interesting concepts. GapView has some interesting concepts. Some of the other folks we work with have some really, really interesting concepts as well. And all of them combined, depending on what challenge or problem an organization is facing at this point in time, we can reach out to our community, reach out to our relationship base and find the skills that we need to help solve that problem. And I think that building out this community in the way that you're envisioning it, Rick, is just, I think it's a brilliant concept and a brilliant idea. And I think has the potential to add real value to the communities that we're trying to serve as well. I think one of the challenges is going to be how do the community that we're trying to serve, the community of business owners, leaders that we see as our ideal customers in this case and that we're trying to serve, how do we help them, or help them is probably not the right word, but how do we communicate the message of what this offer looks like in a compelling way that they want to engage with it and they want to become part of the organization and part of the system that you're building. Because it comes back to all the same stuff we talked about before. The leadership in those organizations has to be willing to gosh, understand we've got some challenges that we need to overcome,
That
and
mirror.
be willing to reach out and look for help as well. And for those organizations that are willing to do that, we've got potential linkage to a tremendous library of talent that can help them solve pretty much any problem they might face.
Yeah.
So I think that's exciting, but I think there's also some challenges.
Yeah, and Paul, John, just saying, one of the things I don't know I've talked to either of you about, and one of the things Josh is bringing to this table that's just quite spectacular to me because I don't think that way, is the entry level to this community because we're blessed with 30 years of intellectual property and literally more than 1,000 blogs we've written and more than 1,000 we've recorded. We've got this content that we're going to give away to attract a bunch of people in to the community, many of whom we hope are the people with the problems, and they can come into the community and see that, oh, there is a community that understands my problems. And, if they're 25-year-olds, hopefully we get them to make this part of their career development, because that trust thing you're talking about is first awareness and then trust. Those two things are huge. And so, one of the things I'm just thrilled with what Josh is building is this curiosity level of the community where anybody can come in and take away a fair amount of knowledge at no cost, because it's just sitting in our AI library. We might as well do something with it.
Right.
It's great knowledge. It occurs to me, first I'll say, I think this is something whose time has come. Organizations that we deal as our, ideal customer, ideal buyer, whatever word you want to use for that, ICP. You can only get something like you're offering by going to a large firm, and it's cost prohibitive in that case. And secondly, the large firm doesn't care. They could care less about you, right? You're just one in a sea of 1,000 of my thing. They're all very transactional. They're just carried about delivery time and price and all that stuff. They don't care. In our realm with companies, your customer may be your friend, right?
Yeah.
Or become your friend, become a family friend. You might be the third generation into this. These are very consultative. These are very long-term relationship type things. And, subject matter experts are usually an expert in one, maybe two subjects. And businesses need a multitude of subjects depending on what we're dealing with: talent acquisition, onboarding, offboarding, succession planning, you name it. There's a bunch of stuff, right? So you offer the opportunity there. So you asked about objections. So as I'm talking about this, and this is just going to come out without having given it much forethought, there's objections on both sides. Me as the consultant or the delivery partner, I want to protect my relationship. It's my relationship, right? And I want to make sure that I maintain the relationship. I want to make sure that anybody who comes in here doesn't, harsh my vibe, doesn't make me look bad or stupid, right? The other thing that I want is I want concern for my customer, which this might be a concern for the customer, is I don't want somebody coming in with a whole new model and a whole new set of catchphrases and a whole bunch of different trademarked intellectual property. I want a common language. I've been working with this person for so long, I get what he says. I know what he means when he says whatever word or whatever acronym, right? Because we've established that I don't need some new Yahoo coming in with new words. Now I got to learn them. What's he saying? I don't know what he means, right? That's very frictionless. So you offer the opportunity to lower all of those barriers. And when those barriers get lowered, for those of us who do this, we value those things and we value the relationship. And there's a bunch of consultants who could care less. They wouldn't want to be involved, and we wouldn't want them to be involved in anyways. But the ones who do, the vistas and the opportunities open up because collectively we start being able to offer services at a much more personal, long-term relational aspect that only were available, to the rich and famous, if you will, right?
Yep.
Who had big, deep pockets, who really could absorb a bubble or two because they had, 2 pallets of gold bullion in the basement or something. So I think Really, it's something whose time has come. And people say, well, this looks like that, and that looks like this. But there's some things that are unique because they don't have 30 years of revenue science data going on. They don't have a very easy to understand common language. And usually those things were doomed to fail from the start because whoever was putting them together were mercenary to begin with and were just trying to make a buck and get rich off of everyone else by charging some sort of subscription fee or something like that. And you're offering to give it all away, right?
Yeah.
If you want to participate, you can have it for free. If you raise your hand and then you don't, I mean, that's unique. It's exceedingly fair.
Well, and John, one of the things that Josh has taught me that I greatly appreciate is how we create trust with the younger generations, and in my case, that's all the generations.
You and I are pretty close on that, Rick.
And part of that is being willing to invest in them before we ask them to invest in us. And so that's something we take pretty serious.
Yeah.
Josh, we're at about time for this. What final comments do you have? And then we'll ask each John and Paul to give us their final comments.
Just, thank you guys both for being here and your knowledge and expertise. And, this is one of my first times getting to ask questions. So hopefully I wasn't, too terrible or anything. So just thank you guys for bearing with me. And I really appreciate your guys' knowledge that you shared with us today. It's very valuable. I mean, I definitely got a lot of insight from it, and it kind of, opened my mind to different things I never really thought about. So thank you guys.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, Paul, we'll let you do the first final word because we let John start. So we'll let you have the opening final word.
Well, no, I appreciate that. First of all, once again, thanks for inviting us to be part of this, and thank you for thinking through the concept of building a revenue culture and what that means for organizations and how we can collaborate with folks like ourselves to deliver a broader package of value to the small mid-sized businesses as we move forward. I think there's going to be tremendous opportunities with the implementation of AI. I think that the SME, small mid-sized businesses, have the ability to use these tools in a way that adds value to their customers and helps them accelerate and close the gap between themselves and the larger organizations. And to the extent that we can work with them to help create some structure and framework so that those tools even accelerate faster, I think it's tremendous. And I'm just really excited about having the opportunity to work with you, Rick and Josh, on moving forward with this concept.
Well, thank you, Paul. One thing I loved what you just said, because when you talked earlier about AI in big companies, they use it to save old money they already have in their pocket. We're going to help people create new money with AI.
New money.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it.
John?
I love it. Well, first, thank you. And Josh, your questions were great. They were thought-provoking, and we wouldn't have had as good a show if it weren't for your questions. So
Thank you, John.
you
Thank
were
you.
linchpin on that. I just was thinking about what am I going to say? I never know what I'm going to say till it comes time to start opening my mouth. And the word that keeps ringing in my ear is community, and I think that's the thing that we as humans, we just don't survive without community, number one. I mean, we didn't grow up with large multinational corporations saving us. We grew up with all these individual communities. And then, of course, we get bigger and we have bigger and bigger hierarchies. But at the end of the day, each community is unique. The one here that's in the Phoenix metro area is different than the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
And the people who operate in there, they need to be, for them to be thriving, right? There's a community of people, not only business leaders, but the people who make up their pools of employees that come to do the work. And they're also consultants and people who help, right? There's all kinds of facilitated organizations. So I keep this word community keeps ringing in my ear because that's what we're talking about. A community of folks aligned not in a way to make a bunch of money or protect our old money, but to help each other make new money, to thrive, to grow, to be able to run the inevitable changes that are coming. That's something we do. Oh, I hate to use the word collectively because it's been over politicized, but that's it. The essence of community is we see that we have shared interests, right? And we don't survive without each other. If I'm me, I'm not getting anywhere, right? And that's, you're not approaching this me. You're approaching it you, and how can I help? And that's how we get stronger. And that's how we have thriving organizations with thriving communities, because they both need each other.
Bravo.
Well, thank you. Thank all of you, and to our audience. You've got the contact information for John and Paul on your screen. I'm sure they wouldn't feel a bit bad if you reached out to them. And I can tell you they do great work. And I've enjoyed working with them in the past and looking forward to a bright future. So hope we see you back in 2 weeks when we do the next one. And any thoughts you have about community or revenue science or applying it, we'd love to hear it. So thank everybody, and we'll see you the next time.